Hi, I'm Admiral, and in this video I'll be playing through Pokémon Emerald again, but this time it's almost completely randomized. Every encounter and every trainer will be totally random. I almost randomized abilities and movesets too, but ultimately decided that I wanted to be able to rely on my game knowledge as opposed to being completely blind. If you get to the end of this video and want to see me do another randomizer with random abilities, movesets, and even evolutions, let me know. With that out of the way, there's not much else to do other than get right into the run. My journey to Hoenn begins, as always, with me stuffed unceremoniously into the back of a mover's truck. I make sure to set the text to its fastest speed and then hop out to greet my mom. She escorts me inside, where I grab the potion out of my item box before heading next door to meet May. She's not in, so I decide it's probably best not to touch someone's belongings while they're not around, and turn to leave. May gets home as I'm leaving, says hi, and then I go to rescue her dad from Zigzagoon, where I meet my choices for a starter. I'm able to choose between Pidgeotto, Beldum, and Wailmer. I decide to go with Beldum since it'll eventually become a Metagross, and Steel is a great type, especially early in the game. From here, I have to go battle May for the first time, so while we battle, I'll talk about some other changes I made. First, the catch rate is maximized. That might be controversial, but I'm willing to risk it for the sake of my own sanity. If the first trainer I fight can have a legendary, then dang it, I want one too. Second, every wild Pokemon can have a random held item. This one's just for my own entertainment, to be honest. And third, field items might be shuffled or completely randomized, I don't remember. I've also enabled running shoes indoors and started with the Nat Dex, which should be everything I've changed here. Anyway, May's Wailmer goes down without issue. I was a bit worried about it since water is actually one of the few types that are neutral against steel, so we could have had an issue, but it turns out that Wailmer only knows Splash at this level. That's lucky for me, so I get the Pokedex and some Pokeballs to catch our first new friend, a Victory Bell. Even if it's not helpful for type coverage, it knows Sleep Powder, so we'll have a bit of insurance here in the early game. This is good, since the first trainer doesn't have a legendary, but they do have a Vulpix, so we almost wipe immediately. I decide to catch a full team of 6 before progressing any further, which I'd avoided since I had only been able to find stinkers so far. Azurill doesn't usually show up here, sure, but that doesn't mean I want it for a randomized encounter. I'm immediately rewarded with a Lapras, but unfortunately use almost all of my remaining Pokeballs catching it, so I need to make a quick stop at the store. After that, I end up with a Torkoal, a Dusclops, and a Flygon, who is far from the best Dragon type we could have gotten. And that's not an indictment on Flygon's quality, but instead it's just a result of how few Dragon-type Pokemon there actually are at this point in the franchise. Either way, this team of 6 is all that I need to get to Petalburg. On my way there, I confirmed that I did not, in fact, shuffle or randomize ground items, so I can rely on my extensive knowledge of TM locations to get some important moves later on. I arrive in Petalburg and meet Wally. While I've made it so that May keeps her starter, I'm not sure if that affects Wally too. He defies randomization and catches a Ralts, so I head to Rustboro next. On my way to Petalburg Woods, I catch an Aerodactyl, who just about beats Beldum in every category. I decide that until I can justify actually leveling Beldum up into Metagross, there's not really a reason for it to be in my party. On my way to swap it for Aerodactyl, I also catch an Exeggutor, who joins the party in favor of Victory Bell. As I make my way through Petalburg Woods, we're accosted by a Devon researcher, looking for a Shroomish. He's definitely in the wrong place, but before I can tell him that Shroomish has probably been randomized to an entirely different side of Hoenn, a Team Aqua Grunt accosts him in turn. The grown man cowers behind me, a child, which is pathetic in itself, but is made all the worse when the Grunt unveils his Pokemon. A Caterpie, menace to none, but especially not the researcher. Aerodactyl dispatches it easily, and we make the rest of our trip to Rustboro unbothered. Before I head off to fight Roxanne, I stop off on Route 116 to check out the encounters there. I run into a trainer first, who sends out a Registeel. This is exactly why I wanted to have a Ghost type early, though. The Regis are a bit notorious in Gen 3 randomizers for showing up, blowing up, and leaving, which is exactly what happens. Luckily, Dusclops is immune to explosion, so we're totally safe. After barely beating this kid's follow-up Loudred, I run into a Mewtwo. After failing to put it to sleep, I throw out a Great Ball and manage to catch it, and then I decide to start leveling the team for the gym, because of course I won't find any other legendary Pokemon, right? Except I do. A Moltres shows up, so I catch it too, and after leveling the team the rest of the way, start the gym battle. I lead with Mewtwo, and Roxanne leads with Beedrill. We outspeed to hit a massive confusion that barely misses out on a one-shot, and Beedrill retaliates with a Fury attack that, annoyingly, hits 4 times with a crit mixed in too. It's not annoying because it does damage, I just don't like sitting through multi-hit moves. Anyway, we finish it off after she heals, so next out is Kangaskhan. We do decent damage with Confusion, but take a nasty critical hit bite in return. Her crit luck so far has been kind of insane. I go for Disable on the next turn, but it misses, which I should have seen coming based on its success rate while grinding. That means Mewtwo is down for free, so I bring in Aerodactyl next. We just start swapping wing attacks for bites with a heal mixed in to boot, but eventually bring Big Mama down. Last is a 4 address, so I swing in Moltres. It protects on the first turn, but we snipe it with an Ember after to one-shot and get the badge. After that, there's a bit of story stuff to manage, but not much. First, Team Aqua fucks around and subsequently finds out. This time, the Grunt has an Aerodactyl, but it's not high enough of a level to no bite, so Mewtwo dispatches it pretty easily. Next, May wants to battle, so I indulge her. It's another fairly easy sweep with Mewtwo, so we move on to Mr. Briney's cabin, where he offers to take me to Dewford Town. Once there, I decide to fish around a little to see what I pull up. It's just a bunch of horsies, so I swallow my disappointment and then head to Granite Cave. I'm not sure why, but I've just developed a habit of going there before the gym. While I'm in there, I catch a Kyogre. At this point, I kind of just want to see how many legendaries I can have on my team by the time this is all finished. I deliver the letter to Steven and then head right to the gym. I lead with Mewtwo and Brawly leads with Lugia. My heart sinks a little, as I don't really have a good way of dealing damage to this thing, but it doesn't really end up mattering. Brawly only ever sets up Safeguard or swaps my Pokemon with Whirlwind, never actually attacking. It's tedious, but we're able to take it down without an issue otherwise. Aerodactyl is out for our side when Lugia faints, so Brawly sends out Horsey next. Thanks to Kyogre getting dragged out, there's Rain, so I'm a bit worried when Aerodactyl fails to knock out Horsey in one shot. I know that a stab, super effective, rain-boosted water move is coming out, but then I remember that Horsey is weak, so Aerodactyl shrugs off the 18 points of damage dealt by Bubble and then takes the KO. Last is Onix, so I bring in Kyogre. This is the definition of coughing baby versus hydrogen bomb. Onix outspeeds, but doesn't attack before going down to a stab, quad-effective, rain-boosted water pulse for the last turn of battle. From here, it's straight to Slateport for some story stuff. I convince one Team Aqua member to give up crime before beating 2 others, and then head to Mauville for the next gym. The only hurdle on our way is May, but her team of Torchic, Makuhita, and Wailord is certainly nothing to write home about. The same is true of Wally, whose team consists solely of the artist formerly known as Ralts, opening our way to the gym after a brief training montage. My Pokemon are strong, but severely underlevel. While I level up the team, I admire the irony in my Water-type learning a Rock-type move before my actual Rock-type, and then catch a Latios for fun. That Latios ends up being my lead into Watson's team, starting with a Parasect. We do decent damage with a Dragon Breath before getting paralyzed by Stun Spore. A massive critical hit Leech Life brings Latios into yellow health, and we're unable to secure a retaliatory hit thanks to a full paralysis, so I switch Latios out for Moltres. Parasect has weaknesses out the wazoo thanks to its horrid typing, so one wing attack is more than enough to bring it down. Jigglypuff is next out for Watson, so I keep Moltres in to plug away with wing attack. Jigglypuff responds with quad-effective rollouts, but we outspeed and win by just 5 HP. I bring out Aerodactyl for Watson's Spoink, outspeeding to hit a bite. Spoink responds with a Psywave, and then we hit a wing attack to finish it off. Last for Watson is Natu. The little bird tanks a single wing attack before going down, securing the badge. After clearing the gym, I teach Rock Smash to Dusclops, letting us head north. Our next stop is Fall Arbor Town, where we'll visit Meteor Falls and then go do some story stuff on Mount Chimney. Maxie's battle is pretty easy, so I head right to Lava Ridge. I get an egg from an old lady, and after way too much walking, I get it to hatch. It's just a Ghastly, and I'm pretty sure I can find a Gengar pretty easily, so I don't bother taking it anywhere other than right to the box. From there, I impulsively head to the gym with no extra training, so hopefully it doesn't backfire. I lead Aerodactyl into Flannery's first Pokemon, a Slackoth. I go ahead and start with a wing attack, hoping for a one-shot so we don't have to deal with Yawn. We almost get it, but unfortunately leave Slackoth deep in the red and get hit with Yawn, so I bring in Kyogre as Flannery heals. Kyogre nails a solid Water Pulse that, again, barely misses out on a one-shot, so we have to take a hit. Slackoth's feint attack is limp even with a crit, so another Water Pulse finishes it. Flannery brings Blossom out next, so I bring in Moltres. The rain makes our fire moves pretty much unusable, so I just have Moltres use Wing Attack. It leaves Blossom just under half health, but her retaliatory Stun Spore misses, so we're unpunished. Another Wing Attack ends it, so I switch back to Kyogre for her third Pokemon, a Sandslash. A Water Pulse finally gets us a clean one-shot, letting me switch one last time to Mewtwo for her Nidoran. A Confusion from our legendary pal fails to one-shot, so we take a solid bite in return, but outspeed on the next turn to finish it and get the badge. If I'd bothered to train up at all, that would have been a clean sweep, but as far as battles go, that was still really easy. Randomized battles are either stupidly easy or stupidly hard depending on RNG, so I need to be more proactive to ensure that our next gym fight isn't a bad time. I head straight to Petalburg to continue my gym dominance streak, but not before taking the time to actually level the team up. Norman leads with Miltank, and I send out Moltres. I start plugging away with Ember and Wing Attack, but realize pretty quickly that Miltank is only interested in setting up with Defense Curl and wasting my time with Milk Drink. After getting a solid burn and contemplating putting my head through a wall, I decide to just switch to Mewtwo so I can end my torture. I time it so that we come in on a Milk Drink and disable it on the first turn out. We take a Stomp in return, and then send Miltank into yellow health with Confusion. Thanks to the burn, Stomp does very little damage, but the burn damage sends Miltank into healing range, so I'm still stuck in this bovine purgatory. A follow-up pair of hits from Confusion free me of my suffering, and I keep Mewtwo in as Snubbull comes out. Our first Confusion brings Snubbull low, activating its Citrus Berry after we take a solid hit from Bite. Our second Confusion barely misses out on finishing it, and my thoughts immediately return to my head meeting a wall as I prepare for Norman to heal. But he doesn't. I went for Swift expecting it to do chip damage, but it instead finishes Snubbull off. I bring out Aerodactyl for Norman's Beautifly, finally one-shotting with Ancient Power. It crit, but I highly doubt that it mattered. Last is Alakazam, so I stay in to deal some good old-fashioned physical damage. Our Wing Attack leaves Alakazam with about a quarter of its HP left, but it just uses Disable, so I slap it with Ancient Power to finish the battle and win the badge. I purposefully paced the recount of that fight to spare you guys the tediousness of Miltank. To contextualize how miserable that was, the actual fight took about 7 minutes. Roughly 4 of those were just spent on Miltank. Luckily, the reward is well worth the struggle. Wally's dad gives me the Surf HM, which finds its way rather immediately onto Kyogre. A 95 base power water move, in my opinion one of the more versatile offensive types, with Stab and always boosted by Rain, is going to cook any Pokemon unfortunate enough to face off against my Aquatic Titan, especially with Calm Mind in our level up moveset. With that, it's off to Fortree for some fun stuff. Along the way, I run into a Suicune. I catch it, but honestly, it's just straight up worse than my other team members right now, so I opt to leave it in the box. I also catch Gengar to prove a point, and then tear through the Aqua members in the Weather Institute. Castform has randomized into a Butterfree, and so will be left behind. I also sweep May again before finally arriving in Fortree. However, I skip the town entirely to meet Steven on the bridge just east, where he gives me the Devon Scope. A fun fact I point out in every playthrough is that when you get to the bridge, you can actually see Kecleon's shadow on the water, which I think is a neat detail. Winona's team isn't much higher of a level compared to Norman, so I head straight for the gym. While checking my Surf PP beforehand, I learned that my Pokemon apparently have Pokerus. I don't know where they got it, but I guess that's cool. Anyway, I lead with Kyogre, and Winona leads with Nidoran. I set up with Calm Mind before taking a bite. It's special in this generation, so we take even less damage than we normally would. I set up again, and then Nidoran switches to Double Kick. From there, I use Surf to one-shot every single member of her team, including a Mew, which is cool because I like Mew. And I know you're probably thinking, hey, Admiral, isn't this a bit unfair? And to that I say, yes it is. But remember this, dear viewer. I could very easily find myself on the other side of this at some point. Anyway, that's the badge. As I leave the gym and travel to Mount Pyre, it's at about this point that I realize that I haven't put a sub-pitch into the video yet. For context, I write the scripts for these videos as I play the game, so I usually find a good place early on during the course of a run or playthrough to shoehorn in a little reminder to subscribe. Obviously, I forgot to do that, And if you've made it this far, you're almost certainly already subscribed or have watched enough of my videos to be ready to subscribe anyway, but on the off chance that you're not, here's a screenshot of one of my video analytics to hopefully guilt you into subscribing. Thanks in advance. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. While in Mount Pyre, I first head to the top floor of the interior to grab the TM for Shadow Ball. On my way, I run into a Jirachi, which I catch. It probably won't end up on the team just yet, if at all, but it's got a great type and is a mythical, and so is definitely worth picking up. After that, I head to the exterior peak for a small gauntlet of Team Aqua Grunts, where I encounter a Salamence. It's one of my favorite Pokemon, so I'll definitely be adding it to the team at some point. I clear Team Aqua out, and then fly to Lava Ridge for the raid against Team Magma. This part of the game is pretty story-dense, if you couldn't tell already, so I'm just going to bounce around a bit. Starting out with the Magma base, things go fairly smoothly. I find my absolute favorite Magma Grunt and sweep his team. Then I find Maxie and sweep his team, much in the same way as Winona's. On my way out, I run into Rayquaza. As my favorite legendary, this fine reptile will be joining the team expeditiously. In fact, the only problem with this part of the game is that I accidentally recorded over the entirety of this section because I'm an absolute moron. From there, I fly to Slateport to trigger the cutscene of Team Aqua stealing the submarine, and then head to Lily Cove to storm their hideout. Before I do that, though, I battle May for the last time and do some shopping. Unfortunately, that's just about the most interesting thing that happens in Lily Cove, because the Aqua Grunts are a total wash. Pun intended. Even a random Regigeist doesn't stop me, so I just push through and make my way to Moss Deep for the 7th gym. I also swing by south to Pacific Log Town, so I can fly there at the end of the game's story. It's just one of those things I can do now to make the game a bit more convenient later. After a quick grind, it's time for Tate and Liza. I lead Salamence and a pretty overleveled Kyogre into their Claydol and Machoke. I have Salamence hit Machoke with a Dragon Breath to ensure that Kyogre's Surf knocks out both of our opponents. Their first two Pokemon are pretty decent, so I'm excited to see who they bring out next, and it's a Wurmple and an Nidoran. Great. I do the exact same thing and get the badge. To be fair, Surf Sweeping is the generally accepted method of beating this gym in a normal playthrough, but it still feels hollow. I cooperate with Steven against Team Magma, and then it's off to watch Archie free Kyogre. That's the story Kyogre, not the one in my back pocket. It'd be weird if Archie could just get rid of my team members. Anyway, neither set of battles is particularly hard, so my next stop is Setopolis, where Groudon and Kyogre are arguing about nothing in particular. Unfortunately, they're a bit too noisy for the residents of Setopolis, so I grab Rayquaza to make them quiet down. That's the story Rayquaza, not the one in my other back pocket. From here, all that's left is the last gym and the Elite Four. Juan leads with Goldeen, and I send out Kyogre. A single Calm Mind is all it takes for me to sweep most of his team with a combination of Surf and Ice Beam. Goldeen, Electrike, Roselia, and Zubat all go down to a single hit apiece. In fact, it's only his last Pokemon, a Chansey, who ends up being an issue. Surf doesn't one-shot, but it does leave Chansey in healing range, so after healing it, Juan just has it start spamming Minimize, Defense Curl, and it even uses Sing at one point. Eventually, we connect with an Ice Beam for chip damage and Surf to take it down, but it was more tedious and annoying than actually difficult. From there, I head to Victory Road, where I face off against Wally. Unfortunately, his team is pretty lackluster, all things considered. I make my way through the rest of Victory Road, where I come across a problem that I hadn't really considered until now. My team has a terrible move variety. It's kind of embarrassing how weak some of my team members still are. Mewtwo's best move is still Confusion. Once I make it out of Victory Road, I swing by Sky Pillar to see what Rayquaza has randomized to, since a level 70 Pokemon is certainly going to be helpful and will be one less Pokemon to level up and find moves for. In an interesting twist, Rayquaza randomized to Rayquaza. I guess I was right about not having to level my whole team. My next task is collecting the handful of TMs I expect to need before leveling everyone up. That just means doing New Mauville and traipsing around Victory Road, Mount Chimney, and Meteor Falls for a couple of minutes, so it's quick. In Meteor Falls, I catch a Deoxys Speed, but at this point, it's not really worth training up anyone new, you know? Speaking of which, I get the team leveled, and here are our final stats and moves. I've taken every measure I can to ensure that even an opposing team of all legendary Pokemon won't be untouchable for us, so all that's left to do is to start the gauntlet and see what we're up against. First up is Sydney. Normally a Dark-type specialist, this time he leads with Shuckle. Even though you can't hear my excited gasp, because we all know how much I adore Shuckle, just know that it happened. Anyway, I lead with Aerodactyl and test our damage with an Aerial Ace as Shuckle sets up a safeguard. It doesn't do a lot of damage, so I switch to Kyogre on the next turn as Shuckle bides. Surf finishes it off, so I switch to Salamence as Sydney brings in Igglybuff. We one-shot it with a super effective Brick Break, and stay in for Sydney's next Pokemon, a Seviper. Earthquake nets us another one-shot, and I keep my good pal out for Zangoose. The irony of those two both being on Sydney's team isn't lost on me, but I do find myself surprised by Brick Break not one-shotting after Zangoose wastes a turn with Detect. We take a pretty hard Crush Claw as a result, and then Sydney heals. I decide to use Dragon Claw to leave Zangoose out of healing range, and it works, letting us finish it on the next turn. I keep Salamence out for Sydney's last Pokemon, a Quilava, who gets outsped and one-shot by a final Earthquake, winning the first Elite Four battle. Next up is Phoebe, whose usual ghost types have been swapped out for anything available in Gen 3. I lead Aerodactyl again, and she leads a Bellsprout. We outspeed to one-shot with Aerial Ace, and then I read the name of her next Pokemon, Kyogre. Feeling like Tai Lung on the bridge, I switch to Mewtwo. We both spend the first turn setting up with Calm Mind, and then I go for Thunderbolt. Mewtwo is able to do slightly over half of Kyogre's health and damage with that one hit, but Kyogre sets up another Calm Mind. That means that our next Thunderbolt won't do enough damage to finish it, so I have to set up again too. Kyogre uses that opportunity to hit a vicious Hydro Pump, and I apparently need to start recording myself playing, because the noise I made when I saw how much damage it did was truly impressive. Something like this. Anyway, we finish it off on the next turn and bring in Salamence to face off against our Tyranitar. This is the type of team that I've been expecting to deal with. I have Salamence hit a quad-effective Brick Break that leaves T-Tar comfortably in healing range, and Phoebe just uses Scary Face. Tyranitar's held Citrus Berry pulls her out of healing range, so we're able to finish it with another Brick Break, but not before taking a nasty Rock Slide. Phoebe brings in her next Pokemon, and it's a Geodude, so I guess we're back to mediocrity. I keep Salamence in to hit a Brick Break, and to my great surprise, it doesn't one-shot. Even more surprising is how much damage Geodude does with Double Edge, leaving Salamence with just 1 HP after Sandstorm Chip. I bring in Kyogre, partially for massive surf damage and partially to get rid of the weather. We tank a Double Edge on the switch, and then finish it with Surf. If you thought that was overkill, just wait. Phoebe's next Pokemon is a truly pathetic Magikarp. I bring in Mewtwo for this guy. Swift Swim lets it move first to hit a Limp Tackle, and then we one-shot with Thunderbolt, finishing off the battle. My third opponent is Glacia, who leads with Mareep into my Aerodactyl. I have him go for Ancient Power, not wanting to trigger Static, but it triggers anyway. I could have sworn on my life that Ancient Power doesn't make contact, but I guess I was wrong. Static means that Mareep's Thunder Wave fails, so I decide to stay in to finish it off. Mareep outspeeds thanks to Paralysis, nailing Aerodactyl with a nasty Thunder. Full Paralysis means that Mareep survives the turn, so I switch to Salamence. Mareep manages to not only connect with another Thunder on the switch, but it crits too. Luckily, no Paralysis means that Salamence can outspeed anyway to finish it off with Earthquake on the next turn. After taking down the strongest Mareep in history, I keep Salamence in for her next Pokemon, Nosepass. However, I suddenly have flashbacks to what happened the last time I had Salamence in against a Rock type, so I bring in Kyogre as Nosepass goes for Lock-On. We'll never know what it was going to try to hit though, as Surf one-shots before Nosepass can attack. Vigoroth is out next, and I keep Kyogre on the field. Another Surf one-shots as Vigoroth just attempts a Focus Punch, so I stay in for her next Pokemon, Persian. It outspeeds to hit us with Payday, but goes down to Surf immediately after. Last up is Feebas, so I bring in Mewtwo. This thing also has Swift Swim, letting it outspeed to also hit Tackle before going down in much the same fashion as Magikarp. Last is Drake. He leads with Slowbro, and this time I lead with Salamence, since Aerodactyl has been kind of unlucky on matchups so far. I have Salamence use Fly, as Slowbro just misses a Headbutt. On the next turn, we connect for very solid damage as Slowbro sets up Amnesia. Our follow-up Earthquake leaves Slowbro just above a sliver, so I decide to switch to Mewtwo, predicting that Drake will heal. I'm right, switching for free before nailing a solid Shadow Ball. Ghost is physical in this generation, and Mewtwo has very respectable physical attack, so I'm not surprised to see Slowbro take almost half of its HP and damage. We also get the special defense drop, but it doesn't matter too much as Slowbro sets up Amnesia again. I have Mewtwo go for Thunderbolt for some chip damage, but it does much more than I expect, bringing Slowbro back into healing range. I don't expect to heal this time, and I'm right, finishing it with a second Shadow Ball. I bring in Kyogre next for his Houndoom, and to nobody's surprise, we outspeed to one-shot with Surf. I stay in for Drake's next Pokemon, a Regirock of all things, but it also gets one-shot by Surf, so I'm not particularly impressed. I bring Mewtwo back out for Drake's Corsola, our next opponent. Thunderbolt is a one-shot, so all that's left is Slack Off. I keep Mewtwo in and one-shot with Psychic, so we're through to the champion and I haven't even had to bring out the big one yet. Unfortunately, I forgot to hit fucking record, so I don't have the champion footage. And as frustrating as that is, luckily I kind of remember what happened. Wallace led with Nidorino and I led Salamence again. We outsped to hit a hard Earthquake, leaving Nidorino deep in healing range. I don't remember what it used, but that's okay. I do remember that I switched to Mewtwo as Wallace healed, and then one-shot with Psychic. His next Pokemon was an Ariados, who I also one-shot with Psychic. Next up was Nidorina, who, if you can believe it, also received a one-shot from Psychic. After that, Wallace brought out a Golbat, and wouldn't you know it, Psychic one-shot that guy too. Second to last for Wallace was a Lickitung, so I brought out Salamence. 2 Dragon Claws brought Lickitung to about a third of its HP as it just missed Disable. It second connected, but that was okay since I just wanted to bring it into a range where I felt confident that Brick Break wouldn't leave it in healing range. Last out was Articuno. I brought out Aerodactyl, ready to one-shot with a quad-effective Ancient Power. It almost worked, but Articuno is just a bit too bulky, so Aerodactyl went down in one hit to an Ice Beam. I decided to bring out the big gun for its only appearance. Rayquaza came out and 2-shot with Outrage, winning the run. It was really cool, guys. You should have seen it. Normally, this is where we'd see the credits and I'd offer closing thoughts on the playthrough, but we don't have credits this time. Messing up the recording once in a run is frustrating enough for me, but it really sucks when it happens twice. Normally, I'd just do it a second time and use that footage, but the game autosaves when you enter the Hall of Fame, and I didn't notice my mistake until I went to stop the recording after the credits. I honestly thought I'd gotten past this kind of error, but on the plus side, it's a nice reminder that I can never stop improving at this whole video making thing that I like to do. It's also a great endorsement of my current process. If I hadn't been in the process of writing the script as soon as the champion fight was over, I never would have been able to remember what happened well enough to recount it here. As for the run itself, it was pretty easy, but I find that tends to be the case with randomizers. They're tough until you get a solid team with decent type coverage, and then the whole thing opens up. I spent the entire time preparing for a crazy strong opposing team that never came, so it did feel a bit anticlimactic, but I'm glad I was prepared. I'd rather have an overpowered team and not need it than need it and not have it. I imagine there's more challenge in later generations, where there's a much greater number of strong Pokemon, but that just gives me something to look forward to whenever I do my next randomizer. Speaking of which, I guess that means it's time for me to discuss what comes next, and for the first time in a while, I honestly have no clue. I don't want to do anything in Gen 9 until I finish the DLC, which I've honestly been slacking on. I've been trying really hard to finish Persona 3 Reload before the new MLB The Show comes out, so it's taken over most of my free time alongside Helldivers 2. I'll probably end up just doing Ultra Sun for the first time normally, so please look forward to that. While I have you thinking about my content, feel free to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. Your feedback lets me know what you're enjoying, and constructive comments can help me work on improving the stuff that I make. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.